Good morning. I want to talk today about the lunar month from January 18th until February 17th. It's going to begin with one of the most beautiful new moons I've ever seen, astrologically speaking, that is. Tensions and other situations will build over the month, and it ends with a solar eclipse on February 17th. And 3 days after February 17th is February 20th, the day that Saturn and Neptune will achieve their exact conjunction in the first degree of Aries. One of the most momentous events in our lifetimes, I do believe. So, this is going to be quite a month. It's a build-up to this long-awaited Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So, let me see if I can share my screen and we'll get started. This will take just a few seconds because I have to get rid of some panels so that I can see what I am doing. And we're ready. The lunar month for the world, America, and Trump, January 18th through February 17th. Okay, first for the world. I have a graph showing some transits from Mars on out, transit to transit planets for the world, covering January and February. I'm kind of marking off where the lunar month begins and roughly where it ends. Some things go a little bit beyond. And I have a couple of interesting pop-up wheels here. First, we start out with a whole lot of beneficial aspects. And there is going to be this minor grand trine involving Uranus, Neptune, and all of these planets up here. On the day of the new moon, January 18th, the moon, of course, will be over here in conjunction with the sun. So that is when this minor grand trine is at its strongest, the harmony is at its strongest. But on the 19th, which is what this wheel represents, we have certain aspects that will become exact. Saturn sextile Uranus, Mars sextile Saturn, and Mars trine Uranus. So basically, on the 19th, we're going to have a very exact minor grand trine between Uranus here, Saturn over here, and Mars up here. And this is going to energize and actualize creativity and trying to bring dreams, Pisces, into concrete reality. Saturn. And Mars is in Capricorn, so people will be trying to take actions to take control of their lives. Uranus is in Taurus, so the focus is going to still be on financial matters and what we need to survive. But the point is, we begin this month with a lot of harmony. On the 22nd, Mars will be making exact sextile to Neptune. Now, this sextile between Saturn and Uranus, it lasts almost until the end of January. So that's going to be good. This is going to indicate people will be making or finding creative ways to deal with their financial situations or creative ways to get the resources that they need. And again, to turn those dreams, those plans into concrete reality. By the time we get to the 27th, though, things are going to be a little bit more troublesome because Mars will be conjunct Pluto. And here I have a little pop-up chart for January 27th. I don't have Mars quite an exact conjunction yet with Pluto here, or actually I do. I take that back. And the chart we're going to see later, I adjusted it a few hours earlier on the 27th so that the moon will be in exact conjunction with Uranus. Because one of the points I want to make is we have three powerful conjunctions on January 27th. We have Mars conjunct Pluto, which could really stir the pot, cause a lot of trouble. We have Saturn conjunct Neptune. At this point, Neptune will have moved into Aries, where these ideologies may result in more aggression around the world. Saturn is still back in Pisces. It won't be exactly conjunct Neptune in Aries until February 20th. But they're still close enough to be considered in conjunction. And this represents old structures that are dissolving, new philosophies and ideologies that will take their place. And then at the same time on this day, we have Uranus conjunct the moon. People are going to be feeling hyper, and there are going to be patterns that are breaking in unexpected ways. Okay. Now the outer planets are relatively quiet in the first week of February, but starting in the second week, Saturn will definitely get within 1 degree orb of exact conjunction with Neptune. And for the rest of the lunar month and the rest of February, that is what is going to predominate. And as I'll point out, this is not your ordinary Saturn-Neptune conjunction. The last time we had Saturn conjunct Neptune in the first degree of Aries was roughly 6,000 years ago in the year 4361 BCE, before the Common Era. And that is roughly around the time that historians call the dawn of civilization. So, the starting point of any cardinal sign, particularly the starting point of Aries, is a very powerful point. Humankind is beginning a new cycle. And hopefully it will be a leap forward and not a leap backward. Okay. Here you can see some day-to-day transits involving both inner and outer planets. And transits are relatively good. I put blue rectangles around. Others are going to be more tense. I put a red rectangle around. So you can kind of look at this at a glance and see what days might be good days for the world, what days might be bad days. We have sometimes a string of harmonious aspects, like right here from January 19th through January 20th. And sometimes things are a little bit more tense. Two dates in particular I'll call your attention to are January 26th. That is when Neptune will move into Aries. And that is when dreams will be actualized. But Aries can be a very assertive a very aggressive side. And keep in mind that the last time, except for last year on March 30th, but before that, the last time Neptune went into Aries was in 1861, the morning after the start of the American Civil War. So Neptune at the start of Aries is a very sensitive place for America. That is where the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to take place. And so the Saturn-Neptune conjunction will hit America very strongly. And it really began last year, and we have seen all of the philosophical changes that have taken place since Trump began his second presidency. Astrologically, this is fueled, it's urged on by Saturn-Neptune conjunct in Aries. And then on February 3rd, Uranus is going to be stationary direct. Uranus it went into Gemini last summer, briefly. And of course, whenever Uranus goes into Gemini, America has a tendency to become involved in wars and other conflicts. But then it retrograded back into Jupiter, where it's been for the past several months. When it goes back into Jupiter, the focus tends to be more on financial matters and what we need to survive. But on February 3rd, Uranus will start moving forward again. And in late April, it will move back into Gemini. Okay. Now here is the new moon for January 18th, 2026. And you can see we have this huge stellium of planets, basically 6 planets conjunct one another, 4 of them in Capricorn, 2 of them in Aquarius. So this is a lot of energy. We have Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus, but we have Mars on one side and Pluto on the other side. Mars and Pluto could stir up some aggression and some protests. More likely, there will be aggressive actions taken by those in power, those with authority. That's Capricorn. And there will be people protesting. That is Pluto in Aquarius. But this stellium of planets, it's receiving a sextile from Saturn and Neptune, a trine from Uranus, and Uranus is making a sextile to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So in terms of these planetary drives coordinating with one another, things are extremely harmonious this day. There is this T-square between Chiron, Jupiter, and Mars, but it is fairly weak right now. So I think what will predominate is going to be this minor grand trine that involves all the other planets. If we go back a few days in time, this T-square will be stronger and can denote some wounding with violence. And we have certainly seen that in America with the recent killing of Renee Good as she was driving her car away, and then an ICE agent shot her 3 times and killed her. Just one instance of wounding or violence occurring under this T-square. But on January 18th, it is fading away, and the minor grand trine is going to take over. So this could be a very harmonious day. We're having what may consider will probably be the most harmonious day of the century on January 21st of 2026, when we have Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Jupiter all making sextiles to one another that are exact to the degree. But the harmony on this day may foreshadow, perhaps, what to expect on January 21st. I'm sorry, July 21st. So, pay attention to how things feel to you on this particular day. Now, when we get to the first quarter moon on January 25th, 2026, this harmony is fading a bit. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Neptune is at 29 degrees, 59 minutes of Pisces. And this is within just a couple of minutes of where it was at when the American Civil War broke out. It's within 1 minute of arc of where it was at the time of the solar eclipse on March 29th of 2025. And of course, the next day, Neptune will move into Aries. Either the next day or, let's see, possibly later today. Let me go back here. Yeah, Neptune will go into Aries on January 26th, so the next day. So this is a very sensitive place for America. And this could be a time when Americans want to rebel against some of the new philosophies and ideologies that are taking over and rebel against some of the structures and laws that they see dissolving. Also, we have Mars and Pluto pretty strongly conjunct at this point. And this is combining aggression with rebellion and transformation. And we have these 5 planets, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Pluto, all in Aquarius right now. So there is much more of an emphasis on power to the people at this point. And we have Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, and Mars and Pluto still making a minor grand trine, though 2 of the legs of this minor grand trine are getting rather weak at this point. But they'll still be able to coordinate their functions to some extent. We also have Mars, Pluto, Sun, Mercury, and Venus all conjunct. So again, people are going to be feeling probably very rebellious and wanting to take power again. And then the lunar nodal axis is making a quincunx and a semisextile, most strongly to Mercury here, to this entire conjunction in general. And so people are going to feel an intensity out there. It is not going to necessarily be easy. It will take some adjustments to do it, but they are going to be feeling a need to make their voices heard. Okay, so this is what's going on at the first quarter moon. Of course, at the first quarter moon, we always have the sun square the moon. And it's squaring Mars and Pluto also. But this is what makes the day somewhat tense in general, that square between the sun and the moon that always occurs at the first quarter moon. At this first quarter moon, People are probably going to be protesting, and they're probably going to be angry to some extent. Certainly in America, but I think also around the world. And we see protests happening now in Iran, among other places. Now, January 27th is when that conjunction between Mars and Pluto becomes exact. That's just a couple of days after that first quarter moon. I set this chart not for the time of the exact conjunction, but for the time when Uranus and the moon will be exactly conjunct. And as I pointed out earlier, we have three very important major conjunctions going on this day: Mars, Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Moon. This is some anger and rebellion, people taking action, wanting power. These are the new ideologies, the breaking down of structures, in some instances, the breaking down of law. And with Uranus conjunct the moon, people are going to be hyped up. This is like having lots and lots of caffeine. Some will express it in very positive, creative ways. But in general, people are going to be feeling very revolutionary on this day and breaking with their usual patterns. Now, we also have Uranus and the moon making a strong sextile to Saturn. Consequently, people will be making plans for new structures, concrete actions they want to take once Saturn moves into Aries. They will be very creative. Also, since Uranus-Moon conjunction is in Taurus, the emphasis is still on personal finances and what we need to survive. So aside from social protests, people will be coming up with creative ways to stretch the dollar all around the globe, creative ways to create a structure for themselves that will allow them to live. And then, of course, I've also talked about the conjunction of these 5 planets up here in Aquarius. I put a blue circle around it rather than a red circle to indicate that this could be positive. This could be a power to the people moment. Okay, things are looking a little bit more tense in the world at the time of the full moon on February 1st, 2026. We still have Saturn conjunct Neptune. We have Pluto, Mars, Sun, Venus, and Mercury all conjunct. And we have Sun, Mars, and Venus opposite the moon. I've put a red circle around this big conjunction at this time because things may be getting a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more uncomfortable. Venus has a lot to do with our nonverbal right brains. It's our nonverbal map of what we feel to be good and not so good, what we like, what we don't like. That creates a nonverbal map of our values. Mars is getting close to Sun, and it will get closer to Venus. And it's the opposition from the moon that is pulling both sides into conjunction with one another. So there are going to be things going on with people's values, most likely, that they're really starting to get angry about and wanting to take action about. And the sun is the self, so they will be taking individual actions and protesting. So this could be a time of discontent. The sextile between Uranus and Saturn, though, is still in effect. And so people will still be trying to create structures that allow them to survive and to find innovative ways to get by. And this brings us to the third quarter moon, where there aren't any real strong lasting aspects going on at this point. The stronger aspects are all rather tense. We still have that Saturn-Neptune conjunction where Saturn is still in Pisces. Neptune is in Aries. Neptune wants to take action, but the big actions probably won't happen until Saturn also moves into Aries. Right now, Saturn is still dreaming about the actions it wants to take, what it wants to make concrete. And so there's a sense of some tension building here. And then when Saturn gets into Aries, that tension may be unleashed and released. But then we also have a T-square today between Sun and Venus in Aquarius, Moon in Scorpio, and Uranus in Taurus. So again, people are probably feeling rebellious, protesting. They're feeling very revolutionary, and things are just not sitting right with them. And with the square between the sun and the moon, the expression of all these inner feelings may not come out in a good way. And the end of this lunar month and the start of the next lunar month is the solar eclipse that occurs on February 17th, 2026. Since this solar eclipse occurs just 3 days before the exact conjunction of Saturn and Neptune, it is really going to add even more strength to that conjunction. And we see at this point that both Saturn and Neptune are now in Aries. They are within minutes of being exactly conjunct, which will happen 3 days later on February 20th. So, my goodness, this is when actions will really heat up. People will no longer be dreaming about what they want to do. They will be trying to do it. And we have Uranus making a strong square to the sun and the moon. So things will be chaotic following this eclipse. People will be feeling revolutionary, and they may be very angry over their financial situation or the lack of resources and other things that they need. We're going to have Mars, Sun, Moon, Venus in the North Node conjunct one another. And it is really Venus that is so strongly conjunct this lunar nodal axis. So people are going to be feeling very intense about their values. And it's quite likely that there are going to be things going on that are not sitting right with their values at this particular moment. Now, the one good thing we have is a nice trine between Jupiter and Mercury on this day. This will help elevate thoughts. Both Mercury and Jupiter are in water signs, so those signs are a bit more feeling oriented. Jupiter expands things. So people may be thinking about their dreams, what they want to have happen. And that could be a nice escape on this day. And communication is well enabled on this particular day. Okay, so that takes us through the lunar month for, let's see, for the world in general. And I want to go back and look at the declination of planets here. When something gets to beyond about 23 degrees, 27 minutes of declination, either north or south, it's out of bounds. And on this day, I'm not seeing anything out of bounds. I'm not seeing anything out of bounds at the third quarter moon or at the full moon. Or on January 27th. Oh, sorry, take that back. The moon is out of bounds here. Not out of bounds a week after that. Let's go a week before. Let's see, or a few days before at the first quarter moon. Let's see, it doesn't look like anything is out of bounds. At the new moon, the moon is a little bit out of bounds. Everything else is in bounds. So at the new moon, and on January 27th, the moon will be out of bounds. When the moon goes out of bounds, when any planet goes out of bounds for that matter, it tends to act on its own. It's sort of breaking with the crowd, breaking with society, going off on its own. And so when the moon goes out of bounds, people's personalities go in their own direction. What the group wants, what the rest of society wants, that is going to be of less concern. They want to follow their own path. And since there are such tensions on January 27th, 2026, having the moon out of bounds could exacerbate the tensions on this day, particularly since the moon will be exactly conjunct Uranus on this day. So all the stress, all the tensions on this day will be probably amplified a little bit by having the moon out of bounds. All right, now let's take a look at America. And the chart I generally use for America is the July 2nd, 1776 chart rather than the July 4th Sibley chart. I usually prefer the July 2nd chart because July 2nd was when the Continental Congress actually passed the resolution for independence. This is when the Declaration of Independence actually occurred. It was tweaked a little bit on the 4th and then printed and made public. So I see the July 4th Sibley chart as saying more about America's persona and its outer image, its public image. But I see the July 2nd chart as having more to do with how it is deep inside. And one of the primary differences between the two charts, aside from house cusps, is that the July 2nd chart has moon in Capricorn, whereas the Sibley chart on July 4th has Moon in Aquarius. Our outer image is that we lead in technology. We hold up the torch for freedom and equality of every person. We want democracy to spread around the world. That's how we like to see ourselves. That's how we often portray ourselves. But inside, with Moon and Capricorn, we're more controlling and oftentimes in very uh, hard and disastrous ways. Uh, we have a shameful history with slavery, genocide against Native Americans. We've tried to control other minority populations, women in particular. Have used soft economic power against countries for several decades to coerce them into doing what we want. But now it appears we're moving back toward gunboat diplomacy under Trump. Okay. So this is the chart I will be using for America. Now, here is one thing which is affecting America for the entire year, not just this upcoming January, February lunar month. Progress Sun is making a square with Mars. In the July 2nd, 1776 chart, this got within 1 degree of being exact, I believe, within the last couple of months of 2025. And we have seen aggressive warlike actions taken against Venezuela and other countries. We're bombing Syria again right now. And we're threatening even to take over Iceland by force. But as we go through the year, the square just pretty much gets stronger. It's exact on November 12th, not long after the midterm elections. So there is a good chance of some sort of violence or aggression occurring, perhaps in conjunction with those elections. And there is a heightened risk of getting involved in conflicts either externally or internally in this particular year. A heightened risk of that for America. A very aggressive America in 2026, in other words. Now, if we look at the transits to this July 2nd chart, a few are unique to this chart, such as squares to Venus, but others also occur in the Sibley chart. But among the tensions are the squares to natal Venus from Neptune, transiting Neptune up here, and transiting Saturn, which gets within 1 degree orb around the start of February. And notice that natal Venus is at 0 degrees 23 minutes of Cancer. And this is one of the reasons why the American Civil War broke out as Neptune went into Aries, because it represents a clash between philosophies, represented by Neptune, and people's values, represented by Venus. There were things going on philosophically that a lot of people did not agree with, and that led to civil war. And that becomes very strong, both from Neptune and then starting in the second week of February from Saturn. And this square becomes exact on the 17th. 3 days later, we have the exact conjunction between Saturn and Neptune. So with that Saturn-Neptune conjunction strongly squaring America's natal Venus, that is one reason why I say this conjunction is hitting America really hard. It really began last summer, when Saturn and Neptune were in Aries within 1 degree of one another for most of the summer. And so the dissolution of structures, the changing of philosophies in America, that really began with Trump's reelection and his taking power on January 20th of 2025. So America, we're in the midst of these changes. It's not something we're waiting for. They are happening right now. Okay. Now, also of concern for America this month is that the lunar nodal axis is going to be making a square to natal Uranus the entire lunar month. That's pretty strong. It doesn't become exact quite yet. You can see it's going to extend beyond this lunar month. Whenever Uranus, which we have at 8 degrees 48 minutes of Gemini, is stimulated, people become more rebellious. People in the country are more likely to become involved with war either abroad or at home. Uranus was being stimulated during the American Revolution, the American Civil War, World War II, and now it's being activated again by this transiting lunar nodal axis. The lunar nodes always intensify things. And falling within this period is going to be Mars, transiting Mars conjunct natal Pluto, which is exact on January 20th, just a couple of days after the new moon. And of course, a little later on the 27th, we have transiting Mars conjunct transiting Pluto. So actually, this whole period from the 20th through the 27th could be marked by some violence or aggressive actions in America, either within America or without. And let me go back to this July 2nd chart for America again. Pluto in this chart is in the fourth house, which represents the homeland, the people. And of course, the whole premise of America is that it transfers power to the people, we the people. Consequently, this conjunction of Mars with Pluto could symbolize further rebellion from people and protests in America. We might see a lot of that during this week from January 20th through January 27th, when the transiting Mars-Pluto conjunction becomes exact. Also, during this whole lunar nodal axis square Uranus period, on the 31st at the end of January, Mars will be conjunct that lunar nodal axis. It'll be opposite the north node, conjunct the south node. And that could be a time when people are angry in this country and they want to return to the way that our country operated in the past. They may not like the future that we're heading toward. Okay. So, Saturn, Neptune, square Venus, the lunar nodal axis stirring up natal Uranus. Those are some of the hard things going on. Now, as far as the easy things, transiting Uranus is making a trine to Pluto. That is in effect all month long, and it will be very strong. And transiting Saturn will be making a sextile to natal Pluto. And basically, we have Saturn in Pisces is making a sextile, transiting Saturn is making a sextile to transiting Uranus, and then natal Pluto is completing that minor grand trine. So there could be a lot of innovative things happening, a lot of structural things happening that are hopefully returning power to the people in this country. And that minor grand trine completed by natal Pluto and the transits, it is very strong from the start of the lunar month until the end of January, and then the trine between transiting Uranus and Pluto continues on very strongly. And in a sense, we can think back to when Uranus and Pluto were last conjunct, which was in 1965 and 1966, back in the 60s. And that was what kicked off the whole social revolution and protests against the powers that be who were taking the country in directions people didn't like. And so when we get into transiting Uranus, making a trine to natal Pluto in America's chart, and then this summer, I think on July 17th, transiting Uranus will make an exact trine to transiting Pluto. These are things which can bring back the kinds of social protests we had in the 1960s. And so we may be seeing these protests in America going on, off and on, between this lunar month, actually between January and July. Now, we also have transiting Neptune, making a quincunx. Sorry, I should put this the other way. Transiting Chiron is making a quincunx to natal Neptune in this July 2nd chart for America. The quincunx represents two drives. It's an aspect where two planetary drives are not able to coordinate well at all. And so for them to interact together, some adjustments have to be made. They are putting pressure on one another in some ways. The whole question is, can they work together? Let me go back to that July 2nd chart for just a second. Let's see. Yeah, here we do. Here we've got it. This is where Neptune is. And transiting Chiron, it's going to be at about 22 degrees of Aries, making a quincunx to natal Neptune. Neptune rules the sixth house, which has to do with the workforce and also with healthcare. So with transiting Chiron over here in Aries, making this quincunx to natal Neptune, there is some kind of pressure being put on the workforce and on the healthcare system, which could result in wounding to people. So, given the premiums that are going to be skyrocketing this month for health insurance, that is probably going to be what's going on. People are going to be feeling wounded in their healthcare. They're going to be feeling wounded that they are being forgotten. by the government, the powers that be, and they are having difficulty getting by. So that is one possible way that this quincunx could be working out, and this is going to last the entire lunar month. So keep your eyes peeled, your ears open to see and hear what exactly is going on that might be related to this particular aspect. Okay, if we look at how the January 18th new moon will affect America, there's a lot going on. We have this lunar nodal axis making a T-square with natal Uranus, making people more rebellious. We have transiting Neptune, making a strong square to natal Venus. People are dissatisfied with these new philosophies. They're going against their values. We have transiting Mars and Mercury conjunct natal Neptune and Pluto in an opposition to natal Mercury. People are probably going to feel like taking action to make their voices heard as they protest. We have Sun and Moon conjunct natal Pluto. So people are going to be in a mood to protest, and they want power to be returned to the people. Transiting Saturn and Uranus are going to be making, Saturn makes that sextile to natal Pluto, Uranus makes the trine. So again, there is likely to be rebellion that is successful in many ways, well coordinated in many ways, in the sense that things go off well. People are going to be feeling revolutionary. They want power to be returned to them. They will be making plans for concrete steps that they can take to retain that particular power. And our workers and our healthcare systems are probably going to be feeling wounded by actions that are being taken, and by, in particular, perhaps the aggressive actions that we are taking to wound even other countries. Why is money being spent on that rather than being spent on lowering healthcare costs and taking care of people and workers? Why are we wounding other countries? Now, the 27th, remember that is when Mars and Pluto will be exactly conjunct. I'm not showing the exact conjunction here because a few hours earlier we had the exact conjunction between the Moon and Uranus, which I also want to highlight. So again, on this day, we have these three major conjunctions going on. We have Mars conjunct Pluto, Saturn conjunct Neptune, and Uranus conjunct the Moon. Still on this day, the lunar nodal axis is squaring natal Uranus, stirring up revolution. And Uranus is, by the way, in the 9th house of this July 2nd chart. So it could be our relationships with other countries that are breaking up, and certainly Trump is waging war and taking aggressive actions and using aggressive rhetoric toward a lot of foreign countries. Neptune is square Venus. That is going to last throughout the lunar month. So again, people are dissatisfied with the changes in structures and philosophies that are taking place. But we have Saturn trine Pluto, Uranus, and the moon at this point trine Pluto. So revolutionary thoughts may turn into rebellious actions and well-structured plans that are being put into place to change things. And transcend Chiron, quincunx natal Neptune, that's going to last, I think, throughout the lunar month. Or let's go back here. Yeah, pretty much the end, almost the entire lunar month. Not quite. But that is that wounding that we're going to be experiencing, in particular to our workers, to our healthcare. Okay, so a lot of tensions going on, a lot of dissatisfaction, a lot of protests. When we get to the full moon, we still have the transiting lunar nodal axis, square natal Uranus, transiting Neptune still square natal Venus, and Mars has just recently been exactly conjunct the natal lunar nodal axis. So at the time of the full moon or a few days before, more actions being taken. Unfortunately, some of those could be violent. Hopefully, they will be peaceful protests. Hopefully, it will be good trouble and not bad trouble that occurs in America around this time. Saturn is moving away from its sextile to natal Pluto, but we still have transiting Uranus, trinatal Pluto, which will probably fuel protests and some rebellion in America. And then when we get to the solar eclipse on February 17th, we still have the lunar nodal axis squaring natal Uranus, but now Venus is part of this configuration, transiting Venus. So it has a lot to do with people's values, even more so at this point. Saturn has moved into Aries within minutes of the exact conjunction with Venus, minutes of solar arc that is. It'll be 3 days before we get the exact conjunction. So this solar eclipse is fueling the changes that this Saturn-Neptune conjunction will bring about in America and in the world. Uranus, by transit, is still making a strong trine to natal Pluto. Again, this is fueling rebellion. It could also fuel transformation in our financial sector. Aside from political rebellion, with Uranus still in Taurus, this could be concerned with financial matters and resources. There may be transformations of the ways our country gets resources, innovative ways to get new things. But also at this solar eclipse, we have transiting Pluto making a sesquiquadrant to natal Mars. And with everything else going on this chart, this could really trigger some kind of violence in America. Mars is in Gemini. Hopefully it will be confined to just rebellious or angry rhetoric, but there is more of a risk of physical violence at this point. Rebellion and revolution. Okay, let's take a look at Trump. Here is his natal chart. We have a good time for that chart, so we're very certain about rising sign, position of the moon, and other things. Now, if we look at what stresses he'll have in this month, the entire lunar month, we have transiting Uranus still square his natal Mars, which you can see here is very close to his ascendant. So he's going to continue to be very angry, very aggressive, very chaotic in a lot of his actions and decisions. Throughout a lot of this lunar month, transiting Jupiter will square natal Jupiter. In his case, he is very likely to overreach, to take actions which go beyond what are prudent, and to have grandiose visions of what he wants to accomplish. Overlapping with all of this is transiting Chiron square natal Saturn. His natal Saturn, over here you can see is conjunct his Venus, which is the ruler of his 10th house of status. So whenever Chiron, which will be over here, is squaring his natal Saturn, it can affect his status. And Saturn also rules his 6th house, which has to do with health. So he could also have some health problems this month. But he'll probably have his status and his health wounded this particular lunar month as all these other things are going on. And on February 5th, in the midst of all these other tensions, transiting Mars will be in opposition to his Pluto. That is when he could be particularly angry or have anger or violence directed toward him. His Pluto is in the 12th house of secrets. It rules the 4th house, his home, his family. I'm sure he has lots of secrets he doesn't want to be made public. We could see more action regarding the Epstein situation at this point when Mars comes into opposition to his Pluto. Or, as I said, there could be some violence taken against him or his family. Those are just various possibilities. There could be other things that happen which are in line with Mars in opposition to Pluto that I simply haven't thought about. So we always have to wait and see what happens around this day. Now, on the good side, transiting Chiron continues to be strongly sextile his Sun, which is in the 10th house. So this brings some much needed healing to him, both personally and reputation wise, in terms of his power. So, in spite of these difficulties, he always tends to have a lifeline thrown to him that allows him to continue. The transiting North Node will be making a trine to Mercury, which means the South Node will sextile Mercury. So he will probably find communication very easy throughout the entire lunar month. And he may appear a little bit more lucid and in command and control. So he has a mixture of anger, violence, and wounding going on, overreaching actions, but he will probably get away with it. He has these strong lifelines being thrown to him at the same time. Right at the end of the lunar month, and really continuing into the next one, will be transiting Jupiter square Chiron, and that's when he could indeed be more likely to be wounded in some way, either personally or financially, since Chiron is in his 2nd house. Okay, if we look at Trump at the new moon on January 18th, he's got that transiting Uranus square natal Mars. He has Mars and Mercury in opposition to his natal Venus. So there will probably be some attacks of some sort on his values and his status. He has transiting Chiron making a sextile to his natal Sun. That brings that healing I was talking about. And the transiting lunar nodal axis is making a trine and sextile to his Mercury, intensifying his left brain, making him a better and more effective communicator this month. Now, there are a couple of things involving quincunxes I want to mention here. Saturn and Neptune are going to be quincunx. His natal Mars and ascendant, and transiting Mars and Mercury are also making a quincunx to his natal Mars and ascendant. These quincunxes are putting pressure on his natal Mars and ascendant. So in this case, this could be anger and aggressive rhetoric from others, putting pressure on his Mars. The visions and structures of others, putting pressure on his Mars. There is pressure coming from without that he will most likely react to by just getting angry and lashing out. Now, there's something else I want to point out here. In the house system I'm using, Campanus, the cusp of his 8th house is at 29 degrees, 21 minutes of Pisces. But pretty much regardless of which house system you use, that Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to take place in his 8th house. The 8th house is the house of death and transformation. It's also the house of debt and other people's money. So there are all sorts of possibilities. And we don't know exactly which ones will come to fruition. But one possibility could certainly be, given his advanced age and perhaps his health, that Trump may die this year. He may not make it throughout the year. Or he may simply die sometime during the second term of his, very likely given his advanced age. Outside possibility of assassination. Mars and Neptune could be a physical attack, an attempt to assassinate the president. I'm not saying that that is the most likely thing to happen. I'm just saying that's one of many possibilities, so we have to keep it in mind. In terms of debt, with Saturn and Neptune occurring in the 8th house, he could run up his own debts, but since he is the leader of this country, he could run up the country's debts at the same time. What is more likely on a personal level is an attempt to grab the money of other people, which he has a habit of doing. Getting donors to give money, which then he uses for his own personal concerns and legal battles. But this lunar month is going to start out with some things that he has to contend with. We'll just have to wait and see exactly what they are, and they could affect him very personally and make him very angry. Now, on January 27th, when we have that exact conjunction between Uranus and the Moon and between Mars and Pluto, and we also have Saturn, Neptune very close to one another. Here it's going to be Uranus and the Moon, which are making a strong square to his natal Mars. So keep an eye out to see what happens. We still have trancing Chiron square his natal Saturn. It was not quite within 1 degree orb in this new moon chart, but now it is. So that is going to be wounding his health and his status, most likely to some extent. We have trancing Jupiter, square natal Jupiter. This starts that period when he could be overreaching. But transiting Chiron, sextile his natal sun, again, that brings some healing. And the transiting lunar nodal axis, squaring his natal Mercury, will make his mind, his left brain appear sharper, stronger, and will help facilitate communication. And we have still transiting Neptune, making that quincunx to the natal ascendant. And the transiting lunar nodal axis is going to be making a quincunx and a semisextile to natal Pluto. Let's see. Yeah, we had that going on back at the time of the new moon. Also, I don't think I mentioned that one, but that is going to, again, be sort of intensifying things surrounding perhaps personal or family matters that he wants to keep secret. And the thing that immediately comes to mind is the Epstein files. Okay. Now, at the full moon on February 21st, still have trancing Uranus, square Mars, trancing Chiron, square Saturn, trancing Jupiter, square Jupiter. So these are things that are lasting for a while. And we still have trancing lunar nodal axis making the trine and sextile to natal Mercury, trancing Chiron making the sextile to natal Sun. That's lasting for a while. We have the trancing lunar nodal axis making the quincunx and semisextile to natal Pluto. That's lasting for a while. Trancing Neptune still making a quincunx to the ascendant. That is lasting for a while for him in this lunar month. But new at this point is trancing Jupiter, making a semisextile to natal Uranus. Oh, right here. Let me go back a second. Actually, it looks like even during January 27th, I did not highlight it at this point, but even at this point, we had trancing Jupiter making that semisextile to natal Uranus. So that is continuing from the 27th through the full moon. And trancing Jupiter was conjunct his natal Uranus back in April of 2025. And that is when he started putting tariffs on all these other countries. Didn't work out well. And that is when he is trying to resolve the war between Russia and Ukraine. That also hasn't worked out well. But when we get to the semisextile, these two planets, Jupiter and Uranus, are now about 30 degrees apart. So this is a continuation. This is trying to take the next step forward, in particular, probably with regard to tariffs and the situation with Russia and Ukraine. So with whatever Trump began last April of 2025, now he's going to try and take the next step forward. We'll have to wait and see what that is. So the This was also, as I said, present on uh, the January 27th chart. And not quite as exact on January 18th, but certainly on the 27th, probably at the first quarter moon on the 25th also, which I'm not showing here with respect to transits to Trump. So a lot of things are continuing for him throughout this month. A lot of tensions and some lifelines and some things which are putting pressure on him. And when we get to the solar eclipse on February 17th, again, still have Uranus by transit squaring natal Mars, transiting Chiron, square natal Saturn. Transiting Jupiter is now square natal Chiron. And this is going to create a greater chance that he is wounded in some way, personally, financially, or in terms of the resources he needs or his values. So, don't know exactly what will happen, but we just have to keep an eye out for things. Transiting Chiron is still making a nice sextile to his natal sun. It's waning a bit, but that's still giving him some healing. The transiting lunar nodal axis is still in good aspect to natal Mercury, strengthening his left brain a bit and making him an effective communicator. But now it is transiting Saturn and Neptune almost exactly conjunct in Aries in his eighth house. That is making a strong quincunx to his natal ascendant. This could be life-threatening over the course of the year or two to come. This could just represent the values of others that are putting pressure upon him and other people's philosophies and things that they want, actions they want to see, adding to his personal pressure. So again, an interesting time for the world, for the country, and for Trump at the solar eclipse on February 17th, which takes place shortly before the exact conjunction of Saturn and Neptune. Okay, let's summarize things. For the world, the new moon on January 18th will be one of the most harmonious I've seen, with almost all of the planets involved in minor grand trine. It may foreshadow the day of great harmony that will occur on July 21st. Saturn in Pisces sextile Uranus and Taurus will be strong for most of the rest of January. This will foster plans to make innovation related to finances and resources a concrete reality. Starting in the second week of February, Saturn gets within 1 degree of its February 20th exact conjunction with Neptune. And this conjunction will likely change the world more than any other within my lifetime, since it's in the first degree of Aries, which hasn't happened since 4361 BCE, before the Common Era. Effects of this conjunction began in January 2025, when Trump began dismantling the American government and democracy, and they've continued with America's removal of President Maduro from Venezuela and protests in Iran. And throughout this year and the next, I expect more structures to dissolve. Mars will conjunct Pluto in Aquarius on January 27th. That could result in violence around that time, but I'm personally expecting an increase in protests from the people. This occurs just 2 days after the first quarter moon, and on that day, there will be 3 powerful conjunctions: Mars conjunct Pluto, Moon conjunct Uranus, and Saturn conjunct Neptune. It could be a day of upheavals, protests, and revolution. The lunar month ends with a solar eclipse on February 17th, just 3 days before the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Uranus will be making a strong square to the Sun and Moon on February 17th, and that can set the stage for disruption, chaos, revolution, and other fast-moving events. Okay, for America, with progressed Sun square natal Mars all year long, using the July 2nd, 1776 chart for America. That also happens in the Sibley chart again. It's expected that America's aggressive tendencies will be unleashed both at home and abroad. Also, this square in July 2nd chart will become exact in November, shortly after the midterm elections. Thus, there's a heightened risk of violence around that time. With transing Saturn strongly square natal Venus, people will likely continue to feel that the philosophies that leaders are espousing do not fit with their values. Beginning around the second week of February, transing Saturn will also square natal Venus, creating additional feelings of oppression and that the country is headed in the wrong direction. Saturn's aspect of Venus will be exact on the day of the solar eclipse on February 17th. And the transing lunar nodes will be square natal Uranus for the entire month. This can intensify feelings of revolution, and transiting Mars may exacerbate things when it is conjunct natal Pluto on the 20th and conjunct the lunar nodal axis on the 31st of January. Okay, transiting Uranus will be trine natal Pluto for the entire lunar month, and transiting Saturn will sextile natal Pluto until the end of January. Pluto represents those who have power, but in America, power is given to the people. Hence, Saturn and Uranus and Pluto will form a minor grand trine, and we may see more people protesting at this time and taking back control of their country. And with transiting Uranus still in Taurus, these aspects may bode well for Americans financially. And here's my summary for Trump. With transiting Uranus square his natal Mars for the entire lunar month, Trump will continue to be angry and act impulsively and erratically. With transiting Chiron square his 11th house natal Saturn, which is also the ruler of his 6th house, Trump could encounter health problems or difficulties working with others beginning in the last week of January. Also, ailments related to the cardinal axis are a possibility. These include stomach problems, adrenal or circulatory or head problems. Interestingly, we've been seeing all those bruises on Trump's hands, kidney problems, or structural or knee problems. Transiting Jupiter square natal Jupiter for most of the lunar month could lead to exaggerated actions that are unrealistic. Could be a lot of overreach related to unrealistic ideas on his part. Transiting Mars opposite natal Pluto on February 5th could result in anger or other kinds of trouble for Trump. However, a sextile from transiting Chiron to natal Sun will bring much needed healing, and trine from the transiting North Node, sextile from the South Node to natal Mercury will enable good communication. These aspects will be in effect for the entire lunar month. I think that's my final slide, and yes, it is. So let me stop sharing. And I'm back with you. So that is going to be it for this coming lunar month. Be a quiet and interesting month. It starts out with a great amount of planetary harmony, more planetary harmony than perhaps I've ever seen. Certainly that I've seen in a long time. But tensions are going to build. As the month progresses, there's going to be a lot of revolutionary tension in America, a lot of impetus to protest things. Trump will be acting erratically. There are going to be times when he could be in danger health-wise or personally. He will certainly be feeling pressure from the values of others, and his long-term health and life could be at risk given his age, given the many people who oppose him. So, could be difficult in a lot of ways. Things are certainly going to be tumultuous as they lead up to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on February 20th, which will signal the end of one era and the beginning of another. So, stay tuned. This is going to be quite a year, and this is quite a month. And though I haven't talked about Russia, let me remind you that Saturn-Neptune conjunctions usually signal major changes for Russia. So we also have to keep an eye on what's going on with Russia, not only this year, but in the year or two to come. So that's it for today. That's it for this lunar month. I hope you found this informative. Let's see what happens. I hope you join me for future videos. But for now, I'll just say so long, be well, and be kind to yourself and to others. These are difficult times. We're headed into uncharted waters we're now entering. So long and be well.